And now Kelly Lyons is an ecologist, associate professor of biology at Trinity University. Oh, come on. Woo! Ow! Trinity! Says here she wakes up to kiss her husband, give her kids a squeeze, eat bacon. She eats bacon and looks at flowers. Cooking and liver moons bring her great joy, or is that silver moons? Either one. She also loves movies and talking with animals, or movies with talking animals. I think I had some of the Alamo brewing. Dr. Lyons lives to find new invasive species and to discover how plants persist in a world where everything eats them. She grew up in San Antonio, left at 18, lived on both coasts as well as Spain and Mexico, then returned to live 10 miles from the home of her birth. Please welcome Kelly Lyons!
Okay, drinking and presenting, wow. All right, here we go. Okay, I've been studying invasive species for over 15 years, and there are a lot of great invasive species stories, and I'm just going to tell you a few tonight. So humans move around the planet a lot, and they often move other species with them, sometimes accidentally, sometimes on purpose, and some of them become invasive, and some of these invasive species actually affect your life. I absolutely adore the Texas wildflower season. Sometimes it's really, really short. Sometimes it's non-existent. For 8 years, I've taken my kids out into the bluebonnets to get pictures. I plan to carry that tradition on again this year. They're not in bloom yet, so I thought I'd capture this once-in-a-lifetime season of yellow flowers with my daughter. But this person may never see the bluebonnets again in this field, and this once-in-a-lifetime event is likely to occur over and over again because this is Rhopistrum rugosum, or bastard cabbage. This plant was introduced from Europe to the United States, and it's extremely invasive. It's now spreading throughout roadsides in Texas, and it's very difficult to remove. So while this may look like a beautiful field of flowers, it's actually just one species. This is showing you extinction events throughout the history of life on Earth. There's 5 of them here. I've added this one right here that was caused by humans. And this is an unusual extinction event because it's caused by one species, us. And the majority of the extinctions are caused because of habitat destruction, but also because of invasive species. Invasive species is a very, very broad term, but loosely, or specifically, the way that we define it is that invasive species have net negative ecosystem impacts. They're homogenizing, meaning that they reduce biodiversity. And the majority of invasive species are non-indigenous or exotic, meaning that they've been moved from some other place to here. So this is my favorite invasive species story. Prickly pear cactus was brought from the New World and taken to Australia for the cochineal industry to dye redcoats. It was also used for forage during droughts. It took over rangelands and spread over 10 million acres of Australia. Big problem, right? So they decided, well, we got to find a way to solve this. So they go to the New World and find another species, and they take this one. They found this cactus moth. They name it Cactoblastis cactorum. Seriously, and they take it to Australia, and they introduce it there, and it does a pretty good job of controlling this puncha, right? This cactus. But and that is one of the best invasive species control stories that we have. So then they take it and they say, okay, we're going to go put it in other places to control cactus. They take it to South Africa, Mauritius, Hawaii, and then back to the New World, right? The farther north in the Caribbean. It goes to Florida. It's found in the Yucatan. The Mexicans are like, whoa, they eradicate it. But then it goes from Florida all the way across, west to the United States. It's now at the border of Texas. And of course, the Mexicans are really freaking out, right? They don't like it there. And so, because they have nopal cactus and they eat tunas, right? And they've got their own cochineal industry. And all the red sections on this map are the ones that are really vulnerable to this cactus moth. And the blue ones are not as vulnerable. But this species is now an invasive species here. Imagine that. Okay, so here's another one, which you're probably familiar with. Prickly pear, kudzu. This is often called the vine that swallowed Dixie. It was introduced because it's pretty, and it was later used for erosion control, and the CCC spread it all throughout the South. It's been reported to be able to grow up to a foot a day, and there was one population here in San Antonio, and Lee Marlowe should be credited with finding and eradicating it. Giant reed, introduced for erosion control from the Indian subcontinent, extremely invasive. It's now presenting a problem along the Rio Grande as a security threat. So now, of course, national security is really interested in this. And my neighbor planted it in front of his yard, and I can't see his house anymore. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I think I have to go talk to Nutria. This is a rodent that's introduced, and it lives in swamps. It has orange teeth, if you can imagine. You should eat as many of these as possible. And or you could make hats out of them. Look at that. She made a hat, and there's a wine koozie. This one's she's at the Nutria Palooza Festival in Lafayette, Florida, and she's made a bustier, right? This is silver Asian carp, introduced for algae eating. It's all throughout the Midwest now. It's threatening the Great Lakes. It has this really unusual behavior where it hears motorboats and it jumps out of the water, and it's really dangerous. It smacks people, broadside. It's really high densities, and apparently it's good eating, but you should eat that too, a lot of that. Brown tree snake. One of these, a single Gravid female, was introduced to the island of Guam, and it's responsible for the extinction of 10 of the 12 native species on the island of Guam. I hear it's one of the quietest islands you'll ever go to. It's almost impossible to eradicate because it lives in holes in limestone and it breeds in those places, and its nests are there, you can't get it out. So that's a really tough one. Lionfish, this is back to home now. This was an introduction that happened through aquaria, really dangerous to dump your fish. It's all throughout the eastern sea, the South Seas, and not South Seas, our seas into the Caribbean, and also going into South America. It's apparently good to eat, but you can, as you might imagine, it's a little tricky to get at the meat. So wild boar, again, eat as many of these as you possibly can. They're really cute as piglets, right? Extremely damaging to ecosystems, and they've caused in Texas probably more than $400 million in damage to habitats. Eat as many of them as you can. But they're tricky to catch. They're real smart. They're extremely smart animals. I hear they're good eating. I haven't gotten any one yet. I'd love to. Asian tiger shrimp, recently introduced to the Gulf of Mexico. It's threatening our Texas Gulf shrimp, which is a really wonderful commodity in Texas, right? So shrimpers are on high alert to be watching out for this shrimp because it is displacing our shrimp, and it's cannibalistic, extremely, and large. Look how big it is. Wow, isn't that crazy? It looks yummy, right? But we don't want it here because there's going to be too many of them. Warm season perennial grasses, this is what I study, rangelands. These three grasses right here, they were all introduced to improve rangelands after we destroyed them. And then these two over here, they were introduced for ornamental purposes. This one's all over the roadsides. It covers like 80 to 90% of roadsides now in Texas, in the area where we live. And this one is really dangerous. Anyway. Cedar, you guys all know this. This is an unusual invasive species because it's native, but it became invasive because of the way we're managing rangelands. So without fire and with lots of grazing, you get a lot of this stuff. And you all are familiar that it does pose some health problems for people, right? Pollen, really rough. And the last one is the most difficult to talk about, cats. Cats are responsible for the death of over 500,000 birds in the United States annually. And we know that trap, spay, neuter release doesn't work very well because they just live in higher densities. So if you worried about your cats or you're worried about urban biodiversity, you'll keep your cats inside.
Okay, just a few questions. Bastard Cabbage?
I didn't name it.
Okay, that's an Austin band name. I don't know if you guys know Austin. They also defined and swallow Dixie. I saw them open for them. Okay, so how did you get into this? What's the fascination with this?
Boredom with botanizing. When there's homogenized areas, it gets really boring. And
Botanizing? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so if you're a botanist, you go out and you look for plants.
Ah.
And sometimes I was in California, and it's overrun with invasive species. Texans are really lucky, by the way. Our systems are relatively intact compared to California.
Now, have you gotten into, say, fire ants or the killer bees? Did we invent killer bees here? Rivard may know. Rupert Murdoch. No, seriously, with the Express News, when they invented the name killer bees.
Oh, is that right?
Yes,
Congratulations.
the Africanized bees.
I think that's great. It scares people. That's
is that something you look at stuff around here now? It's changing.
I think fire ants are fascinating. Absolutely. There are other kinds of ants that I prefer, but actually, if I had it to do over again, I would study ants.
Where's your husband?
My husband.
I don't know. Yeah, okay. Wonder what the morning conversation is. No. And why did you come back to San Antonio after living on the coast and being all that?
I like it here, and my family's here, and Trinity made a good offer.
All right, well, thank you very much, Kelly Lyons. Good job.